that Russia was preparing something. Grozny had been bombed for a few weeks already. The negotiations between the separate Chechen government and the Russians were collapsing, so we expected that something really big would happen. On December the 11th, we received news that the Russian troops entered Chechnya from 3 directions, and the war began. It took a few more weeks before we really felt that Grozny was becoming uninhabitable. Bombing, shelling from all directions. So it was like hell on earth. The most frightening aspect, in my view, was the bombing from the air. When Russians drop these enormous bombs and they produce a deafening explosion. That is the most frightening thing. The Russians have enormous firepower, and they unleashed all of it on this small city. One foreign correspondent, I remember, was counting the number of detonations per minute, and it was like every second you had several detonations. The first casualties were, of course, ordinary people who couldn't find shelter or were in their apartment blocks, which had no basements. So the most vulnerable people were ordinary people, mostly, by the way, Russians, because Russians did not have those extended families in the countryside where a lot of Chechens moved. Russians were left to their own devices, actually. I wasn't planning to leave Grozny, although I realized that there was no electric power, there was very little water left, and almost no food. But on January the 5th, 1995, I heard loud knocks on my door, and when I opened the door, I saw my cousin standing there, clearly shaken, and he told me that his house was just bombed and we need to get out of Grozny. So I collected some things, mostly things which belonged to my children, just one book, my favorite dictionary, and my cats, and I joined my family, which was at the time in the mountains, staying with our relatives. But as the conflict progressed, almost all of Chechnya was subjected to shelling or bombing from the air, so there was virtually no place safe. What happened in Grozny in 1994 was not an isolated episode. Chechnya and Russia have a very long and difficult history, and this episode was part of that difficult history. I don't recognize all these pictures. They look alien to me. Yeah, it looks bright and glistening, but it's not the Grozny where I was born. I would love to return, but that is probably in distant future.
Есть за горами, за лесами маленькая Чечня. Там люди с грустными глазами, всюду идет война. Там небо вспышками искрится, от взрывов дрожит земля. Там ежедневно гибнут люди, грусть в их глазах видна. Маленькая Чечня, маленькая Чечня, стонет земля и плачут дети, нам не нужна война.